Marilyn is a longtime reader of the Urantia book. She was introduced to the book by her husband, David, whose family has been involved since the early 1930s. She's a member of the First Society of Readers of the Urantia book in Chicago and served on the General Council and Executive Committee of the Urantia Book Fellowship for 18 years. She became a trustee of the Urantia Foundation in January 2008 and is currently its vice president. After receiving her doctorate from Northwestern University in the educational psychology, she served in a variety of positions heading research, evaluation, and school improvement initiatives in schools. She is currently as a partner in Gaines Education Group and Consults with educational organization and assessment and online learning. Um, Mar- Marilyn and her husband live in Lincolnshire, Ireland. Sorry. She has 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. I have felt so fortunate to have the opportunity to participate in exciting work and bringing our beloved revelation to the peoples of the world. It is indeed an honor to serve with all those around the planet who have dedicated their lives to this important undertaking. And you have to excuse me, I'm Dutch. I speak 4 languages, but not perfect. So you have the floor.
Okay, can everyone hear fine? Okay, if you're having any trouble, just raise your hand or let me know so I will go closer to the mic. Well, anyway, thank you all for joining me this afternoon to talk about probably one of my favorite topics because it is so essential to us in becoming better servers. And I'd like to begin with a speech that Christy gave many, many years ago, actually about 50 years ago, and she ends with a little prayer. So Christy was then president of Urantia Brotherhood, and she spoke to the Triennial Delegate Assembly about God's vision and call to serve the 5th epical revelation. She says, "We have been called to the great work of taking the first step of offering to mortal man a new light, a new revelation of the love of God. The easy jog-trot religion of former days no longer suffices to meet the challenges of today. Following Jesus' way of life calls for an act of complete commitment, a dedicated intention, a resolute purpose, and a trumpet call to the life that will not compromise. God has provided the vision and the call. The answer must be ours. There are steps we can take that will help us to meet the challenge." She says, first, we need to cultivate the power to envision our share in bettering the world. Second, we need to believe that God can speak to us, that he can use us and our talents, and that he does call us to our particular place of service. Third, we need to be willing to be used for the fulfillment of this vision. Let us pray that we may all become valiant soldiers of the circles, wholeheartedly enlisted in the solid ranks of those mortals who shall go forth in the coming battle for truth against error under the faltering leadership of the mighty seraphim of progress. I think if this is not a call to progress and service, there probably isn't one. So, you know, every time I read this, it just so beautifully says to me how lucky we are to have found the Urantia book and the Revelation. But luck doesn't always cut it, and we need to actually act. And that's kind of how I got the idea for this topic about cultivating habits of service. Because in a way, we need to shed some of our old ideas, and we need to be able to come up with new ways of thinking. And I think that's kind of what the Urantia book is telling us over and over and over again. But of course, it's so very hard to do. So today's presentation, and I'm going to now turn over I don't know, after Christy's beautiful words, I don't know that I can speak too well, but I will do my best. I'm going to share my screen, which should have the PowerPoint sitting there. And I will start. All right, cultivating the habit of service. The focus of this presentation is really on how we can develop habits, and it's to do unselfish good to others as we go about our daily lives. And what better way to look at this than through the lens of Jesus' life of service, the master server. Habits. You don't really think about the Urantia book and habits too much. And actually, I was kind of intrigued by in making the presentation when I read a quote from the book that talked about habits. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a little different. We don't talk about it a lot. We talk about bad habits maybe, but we rarely talk about developing those kind of habits that are going to serve us well. So habit, a recurrent, often unconscious pattern of behavior that is acquired through frequent repetition. It could be an established disposition of the mind or character, or possibly a customary manner or practice. Now, I don't know, all of them seem to fit with the Urantia book relatively well, and with what Jesus did in terms of building his habits so that he could serve. The book uses the term habits, actually, 26 times. And it's used in all different contexts. I think that's what makes it so interesting, although 12 of them are in the Jesus section, part 4. Sometimes the word habits is used in the context of mores, cultures, and races. Sometimes it refers to a clean body and mind, that we need to have habits that lead us to that clean body and mind. Sometimes they talk about habits as the behaviors that people have. All those comparisons the Urantia book makes between one thing and another, good and bad. And they talk about that through the behaviors of people. They talk about it also in terms of thinking, and that's thinking, how do we think? How do our habits affect us? How do our habits make our life easier or harder? And lastly, in terms of, we think about that in terms of habits of worship, habits of prayer, and that's probably something that we don't always think about as habits, but the book talks about it as a habit. So I'd like to take a brief rest already and ask you, I always think of bad habits. I don't know if I really ever think of good habits. And so, with that word, the connotation is, oh, okay, I have this bad habit and, I don't know, whatever I do that's bad. I'm sure there's many things, but I don't think about good habits very often. And I thought I'd like to take a moment and if you would share on the chat some of your thoughts about what are some of your good habits. I think we're going to stick with good rather than bad, but take a minute and share some of your ideas of what are some of your good habits that you can identify. Well, let's go ahead and go through maybe some of the first, 5 or so. And I know chat is also saved, I believe. So all of these habits, good habits, will end up being known by others, and I appreciate you for sharing those with us. I'm really hoping for 100% participation, and I know 100% out of so many people's heart, but please participate. This is your workshop as well as mine. All right, well, let's look at the first few. We talked about, Mark says, can't wait to hear your presentation. Oh, sorry, that was an habit. I will go down a bit further. Okay, guard, worshiping God. We have Mark again, habit of service, take a service commitment and show up for it. Christina's cheerful, taking time for God every morning, besides my cup of coffee, and having a smoothie every day. Well, those are definitely habits, good. Emmanuel says that. Cynthia says smiling at people and looking at them in the eye. Luis says being patient. Christina says I take care of things as I pass by. And Kurt says listen to others and try to discern what they are, their viewpoint. Now I'm going to kind of stop here because you have an idea. Thank you all for sharing those good habits. And I think that's what we need to consider as we go into this mode of service, the kind of service that Christy admonishes us to do for this revelation, because we know the revelation is for the future as well as for now. Good or bad habits? Excellent. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, move forward and talk a little bit about Okay, habits, according to the Urantia book, good habits, what they may say are good habits. Habits which favor religious growth embrace cultivated sensitivity to divine values, recognition of religious living in others, reflective meditation on cosmic meanings, worshipful problem solving, sharing one's spiritual life with one's fellows, avoidance of selfishness, refusal to presume on divine mercy, and living in the presence of God. The factors of religious growth may be intentional, but the growth itself is unvaryingly unconscious. This issue of conscience and consciousness kind of runs through much of what's talked about when they talk about habits. Avoidance of selfishness, all of those things I think are reasonable to aim towards, really. And so these habits which favor religious growth become very important to us as we become better and better servers. How can we shape these habits? So the Urantia book also gives us a little bit of guidance on that. This first quote is quite interesting in that it kind of gives like a sequence almost of what happens when we search for new habits. Presently, new systems of values come into existence. New formulations of principles and standards are achieved. Habits and ideals are reshaped. Some idea of a personal God is attained, followed by enlarging concepts of the relationship thereto. They also talk about growth in terms of habits. Growth is also predicated on the discovery of selfhood, accompanied by self-criticism, conscience. For conscience is really the criticism of oneself by one's own value habits, personal ideals. So I'd like to stop just for a moment because that's pretty powerful, I think, about how we can work to reshape and how conscience has such a big role in that self-criticism, because if we don't criticize ourselves, our chances for growth are not so great because everything's just fine. So is there, I was wondering if anyone would like to make a comment on this kind of traversing through and being able to change habits and ideals. I like the word reshaped. I mean, I think that's a really helpful word in looking at that. So could someone else monitor that, and anyone want to speak to this idea of habits and growth and how to grow? Okay,
Yeah, we
great.
do have two hands. I think David Henry,
Thank you.
you're free to speak.
Yes, it's interesting that they point out this, let me get back to where I can't find it. Criticism of yourself. I think this is referring to an initial discovery of your creator and how he develops in your soul. It's wanting to do the will of God. And this is sort of what Christians call the first miler. Urantia book calls it first miler too. But once you understand the teachings of Jesus and want to live them, Jesus provided no, there was no provision in Jesus's teaching for constant self-evaluation, because once you enter into service, then it's a very progressive, very positive, you're actually doing and working on the will of God. So I just found this very interesting because it almost looks like it is contrary to some of the other teachings in the Urantia book of not doing the not being self-conscious, not having self-criticism. So I think you have to take this in the context as to, this is kind of the beginning, and it's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We had a couple other hands raised.
Yes, I think Chris Wood also raised his hand before.
Go, Chris.
Chris, are you there? Okay. Mark Hutchins.
Hi, hey Marilyn. Hey, so what comes to mind for me on this is this thing that I heard of a few years ago called the motivation principle, and there were some studies done, and essentially what they found was that motivation isn't acquired by sitting and trying to acquire motivation. Motivation is only acquired by taking action. So a simple way to understand this would be the idea of going to the gym. Now, if I haven't been to the gym for 6 months, I'm not motivated to go to the gym. I know I should go to the gym. I want to go to the gym, but I'm not going to the gym. I'm going to watch some Netflix and eat potato chips. In order for me to get motivated to go to the gym, I have to make myself get up and go to the gym. But when I get up and go to the gym, the next day or the day after that, I feel a little better. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I think I want to go to the gym again tomorrow. And then I go again, and then I go again, and then I go again. And the next thing I know, I wake up and I'm motivated to go to the gym. I want to go because it makes me feel good. But the only way I got motivated was by first taking action that was against what my natural inclinations were. And I think that's the same with service. I think it's about taking action. I think it's about taking commitments. I think it's about taking steps towards service. And then I think the more we do it, the more we realize the benefits of it, the more we want to do it. And I think, so acquiring the habit of service by taking action first is key here.
Yes, I agree. And as we go on, we'll look a little bit more at the role of action and doing, which is so important to service. Okay, well, thank you. And the other comments hopefully will get caught on the chat. Thank you for volunteering. Let's go on to our next slide. The little thing is not working too well. Okay, but yay, we can look to Jesus for guidance. But just a couple things to remember. We can never become Jesus. He was a creator's son, and we live in a different time. But we can learn from Jesus' example how to do unselfish good to others as we go about our daily lives. We are constantly faced with choices. It is only by our actions that we can do unselfish good to others as we go about our daily lives. And finally, we can shape our habits so that we can better do unselfish good to others as we go about our daily lives. And I think that do unselfish good to others is so important, as well as our daily lives. I have a hand raised. Just, was there a comment?
Yeah, Manuel, actually.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to contribute. I found that very interesting that those two text parts that you actually are left right now were about values. And it was about the value habit. And I just had a realization that the value habit is that which makes me unhappy with my personal living. It is the striving towards something higher that actually brings up the self criticism to a point where I actually want to change. And for me, that's really key. Thank you. I'm a little late in raising my hand, sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so I think one of the most moving passages in the book, and I can so appreciate the Melchizedek who wrote it, because it's like it appeals to your soul. You read it and you think, oh my gosh, I can do better. I really can. Now, this is kind of, the screen has got text on it, but it is kind of small. I've given you the, if you've got your book and would like to read from that, I've given you the place in that book where you could go. So let's think about Jesus as he passed by as a basis for the kinds of things that are that made him so powerful in serving others. Jesus spread good cheer everywhere he went. He was full of grace and truth. His associates never ceased to wonder at the gracious words that proceeded out of his mouth. You can cultivate gracefulness, but graciousness is the aroma of friendliness which emanates from a love-saturated soul. Goodness always compels respect, but when it is devoid of grace, it often repels affection. Goodness is universally attractive only when it is gracious. Goodness is effective only when it is attractive. Jesus really understood men. Therefore, could he manifest genuine sympathy and show sincere compassion, but he seldom indulged in pity. While his compassion was boundless, his sympathy was practical, personal, and constructive. Never did his familiarity with suffering breed indifference, and he was able to minister to distressed souls without increasing their self-pity. Jesus could help men so much because he loved them so sincerely. He truly loved each man, each woman, and each child. He could be such a true friend because of his remarkable insight. He knew so fully what was in the heart and in the mind of man. He was an interested and keen observer. He was an expert in the comprehension of human need, clever in detecting human longings. Jesus was never in a hurry. He had time to comfort his fellow men as they passed by. And he always made his friends feel at ease. He was a charming listener. He never engaged in the meddlesome probing of the souls of his associates. As he comforted hungry minds and ministered to their thirsty souls, the recipients of his mercy did not so much feel that they were confessing to him as that they were conferring with him. They had unbounded confidence in him because they saw he had so much faith in them. He never seemed to be curious about people, and he never manifested a desire to direct, manage, or to follow them up. He inspired profound self-confidence and robust courage in all who enjoyed his association. When he smiled on a man, that mortal experienced increasing capacity for solving his manifold problems. Jesus loved men so much and so wisely that he never hesitated to be severe with them when the occasion demanded such discipline. He frequently set out to help a person by asking for help. In this way, he elicited interest, appeal to the better things in human nature. The master could discern saving faith in the gross superstition of the woman who sought healing by touching the hem of his garment. He was always ready and willing to stop a sermon or detain a multitude while he ministered to the needs of a single person, even to a little child. Great things happen not only because people had faith in Jesus, but also because Jesus had so much faith in them. Most of the really important things which Jesus said or did seemed to happen casually as he passed by. There was so little of the professional, the well-planned, or the premeditated in the master's earthly ministry. He dispensed health and scattered happiness naturally and gracefully as he journeyed through life. It was literally true. He went about doing good. And it behooves the master's followers in all ages to learn to minister as they pass by, to do unselfish good as they go about their daily duties. As I said, I think this is one of the most moving passages in the book, and it gives us really a lot of guidance. But what I kind of thought is, it's like I'm so far away. You know, you read it and you go, oh my gosh, I could do better here. I could do better here. And I guess that's what we were talking about when we were talking about motivation, because we can do better, but we can't do better in everything. And so that's a little bit why I kind of did this, a little analysis, which helped me figure out how best to maybe put some of these things together and a constellation of ideas. So this is my work. I went back and I looked at the whole thing, and I tried to figure out what were some of the main themes or main qualities of Jesus' service. And I thought, well, okay, if I better understood that, maybe I could take specific actions, which we know is what's so important, and improve or show progress. So the first is to act friendly, kindly, and graciously to others. Second, to show compassion, sympathy, and respect for others. Third, which is an odd one, exhibit curiosity, open-mindedness, and interest towards others. Fourth is courageously and with confidence in yourself and others. Fifth, be a sincere problem solver. And last, probably the very, very hardest, because I think this is really personality integration, but it's to strive to demonstrate a well-balanced character. What I'd like to ask is, let's go on. Like I said, it was my own categorization, just because I like boxes, but also to be able to say, okay, well, I can look at this and I can say, these are some of the things that were so important to Jesus as he passed by. And maybe it gives us some ideas of the kinds of things that we might act upon. So what I'd like to ask for you, I thought I had a polling feature, which I do not, but I'd like to ask you, which quality of Jesus' service do you admire the most? And if you would, on the chats, like write a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And I'll give everybody kind of a minute, and we'll look a little bit at how many people thought which were the most admirable in Jesus' life. Okay, well, we seem to be slowing down. So what I'm going to ask my dear husband to do is kind of look through these and make a little chart. And so we can talk a little bit about where they fall. They look pretty diverse, actually. Yeah, so that's a good thing. And I don't know whether sometimes we choose those that we really would like to see ourselves do a better job at. But you did a lot of great things. Okay, David, will you please do that for us? All righty, let's go ahead. Now, when I did these little 6 categories, what I'd like to tell you is that I've given you a handout. And that handout is a file that should be attached. And that handout is a complete list of all of the quotes I put together for each category. So I said, okay, act friendly, kindly, and graciously to others. So there's about 1.5 pages of quotes for each of the 6. Unfortunately, with the time we have, it wasn't possible to do them all, but you can, use them, read them, and they give you kind of a big picture of Jesus and his life and what he did and some of the things he said to us. So if you want to open that file at some point, please do. So for us right now, I'm going to have to, I had to cut them back. And I'd like to look at each category and wondered if I could find a reader for the first category, which is act friendly, kindly, and graciously to others. Since I can't see you, would you pick a reader, someone that would raise their hand?
Nobody yet raised their hand.
Oh, come on, everybody should participate.
Dana.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dana.
Here we go. Starting with 14 there, right?
Yes.
The idea of duty signifies that you are servant-minded and hence are missing the mighty thrill of doing your service as a friend and for a friend. The impulse of friendship transcends all convictions of duty, and the service of a friend for a friend can never be called a sacrifice. And to Nathanael, Jesus said, "If therefore you serve me with a whole heart, make sure that you are devoted to the welfare of my brethren on earth with tireless affection. Admix friendship with your counsel and add love to your philosophy. Serve your fellow men even as I have served you." Jesus spread good cheer everywhere he went. You can cultivate gracefulness, but graciousness is the aroma of friendliness which emanates from a love-saturated soul.
Thank you, Dana. And what do you take from these 3? And what sticks out to you? Did we lose Dana?
I think, yeah, we muted him, but I can get
Yeah,
him.
unmute him. I think Dana's got ideas. Go, Dana. What really stuck out to you?
There we go. Just the enormous goodwill. He was so through and through saturated with this gentle, positive, friendly goodwill, and it just couldn't help but be expressed with every person and every interaction that he was in. So attractive.
Yes, and I liked too the one about the duty. It sounds like duty is good, but then it goes, well, no, it's not so good. It's kind of like that contrast. Oh, this is good. Well, this isn't so good. But that thrill of your service as a friend for a friend, I think that kind of struck me in reading through these. And again, you know, the numbers relate to the document I sent you. So when you see a 14, that will be in the handout number 14, just a way you could go back and forth if you chose. Okay, let's move on to number 2, which is going to be show others compassion, sympathy, and respect for others. Would someone be willing to read this one?
I think John Hales, he raised his hand before, so.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay. I hope he's still there.
You know, John is a wanderer, so you never know, but he has his headphones.
I think he's gone. Can somebody else raise their hand?
Always respect the personality of man. Never should a righteous cause be promoted by force. Spiritual victories can be won only by spiritual power. Be not cynical with my fear-ridden children. Idleness is destructive of self-respect. Therefore, admonish your brethren ever to keep busy at their chosen tasks, and put forth every effort to secure work for those who find themselves without employment. Nothing ever seemed so important to Jesus as the individual human who chanced to be in his immediate presence. He was master and teacher, but he was more. He was also a friend and neighbor and understanding comrade.
Thank you so much, John. Did anything stick out to you when you were reading it?
Well, it sort of mirrors my experience with my elder brother in my daily talks with him at random. Yeah, that I like that idea. He's my comrade, which he is, and as long as as I said, I refer to him as my elder brother, so that totally humanizes him, and so we're just buddies.
Thank you, John. All right, let's go to number 3. This is the one that's a little weird, I think. Who would volunteer to read it?
Christina.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Jesus' usual technique of social contact was to draw people out and into talking with him by asking them questions. The interview would usually begin by his asking them questions and ending by their asking him questions. He was equally adept in teaching by either asking or answering questions. If you love your fellow men, you must have discovered their values. Jesus loved men so much because he placed such a high value upon them. You can best discover values in your associates by discovering their motivation. If someone irritates you, causes feelings of resentment, you should sympathetically seek to discern his viewpoint. Truly educated persons are not satisfied with remaining in ignorance of the lives and doings of their fellows.
Anything stick out to you when you read it?
Well, the whole idea of being a good conversationalist, I always think of it as being a good listener, but in this it talks about being a good questioner. And I always feel that when I'm being a good listener and I notice the person's eyes are sparkling about something they're talking about, that I should ask questions having to do with that topic because that's something they value. And I don't have a problem with that, with responding after listening, but I might have a problem with initiating the first questions like, should I really pretend I don't know the map of the area and ask the person for help when I actually really do? And so I would say my problem would be just the very first initiating of the first question.
Yeah, I think it's actually be a great topic because mine always is the weather. You know, that's the place I go in an elevator. It's the weather. How's the weather today? You know, and I do think that's a good thought, Christina, because we so often don't know how to initiate something when we're in a situation. And it's as we pass by people, or even on a sidewalk. But yes, thank you for sharing. Okay, let's go on to number 4. Do I have a reader for 4?
Yes, Luella.
Thank you.
Okay. His watchword was fear not. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
His bravery was lofty and his courage often heroic, but his courage was linked with discretion and controlled by reason. It was courage born of faith, not the recklessness of blind presumption. He was truly brave, but never audacious. He inspired hope and confidence in the hearts of all who came under his ministry. I don't know if I can read this because I'm so touched, but I'll try. Only those who had not met him feared him, and he was hated only by those who regarded him as the champion of that truth which was destined to overthrow the evil and error which they had determined to hold in their hearts at all cost. He could maintain his confident attitude because of his unswerving, is that the right pronunciation? Unswerving trust in God and his unshakable confidence in man. He was always touchingly considerate of all men because he loved and believed in them. It requires courage to invade new levels of experience and to attempt the exploration of unknown realms of intellectual living. Sorry.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything?
I would like to be that good a friend.
It is a wonderful observation. Yes, I would like to be that good of a friend also. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go on to number 5, be a sincere problem solver. And there's much more on this in the handout. It was almost kind of hard to pick out, but anyway, will someone please read?
Yes, Luis, he offered himself via the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be a sincere problem solver. The great mistake is that when life problems excite our profound fears, we refuse to recognize them. The wise and effective solution of any problem demands that the mind shall be free from bias, passion, and all other purely personal prejudices which might interfere with the disinterested survey of the actual factors that go to make up the problem presenting itself for solution. The solution of life problems requires courage. But the greatest of all methods of problem solving I have learned from Jesus, your master. I refer to that which he so consistently practices, and which he has so faithfully taught you, the isolation of worshipful meditation. In this habit of Jesus's going off so frequently by himself to commute with the Father in heaven is to be found the technique. What I find most touching, and the reason why I chose 5 as my favorite of the 6, is because for me, the essence of the Urantia book distills into unselfish loving service. And for me, a practical way of taking everything that we learn from the Urantia book and try to bringing it into existence is by concerning ourselves with our fellow women and men and try to be of help in solving their problems and their perplexities and their complex situations. And in this particular section, we know that we have to our disposal worshipful meditation as the greatest tool to resort to God for the greatest courage that will guide our behavior in trying to be of service to those people unselfishly.
Thank you very much. And then our last section. This is just a single quote. There's so many about the well-balanced character that he exuded. And as I said, if we go even deeper, we go into the personality integration. How do we integrate our personality, which will lead to increased service? Is there a reader?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Can somebody raise their hand?
Well, with our time tight, maybe I'll go ahead and read it because we do have to end in a few minutes. Jesus was the perfectly unified human personality, and today, as in Galilee, he continues to unify mortal existence and to coordinate human endeavors. He unifies life, ennobles character, and simplifies experience. He enters the human mind to elevate, transform, and transfigure it. It is literally true. If any man has Christ Jesus within him, he is a new creature. Old things are passing away. Behold, all things are beginning new. And I think that is such a beautiful statement. Our time is up, although I would like David, if he could tell us what kinds of things people were interested before we conclude. David, were you able to compile any of that?
Yeah, I did. What
Thank
kinds
you.
of things are number 1 through 6? But there were 4 1s, 3 2s, 5 3s, nobody for 4, which I felt bad about. Number 5, 2 people, and 11 for 6, the one you just read. And about 4 people had trouble settling on any of those 6s, or the 6 qualities. If I could just add my own comment, though, what I chose, you know how the apostles often chose something about Jesus that they admired the most, that they felt lacking in themselves, almost right down the line. And I chose something like that I struggle with. And I noticed somebody whom I admire for being really good in that area also chose the same one I did. So I think you might get a little bit of interesting results because some of us chose what we're not good at and some of us chose what we are good at.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for your great participation. And just remember, if you download that handout, it has a ton of different quotes, you know, that are full paragraph quotes that I took these little snippets from. So thank you all for everything.
Thank you, Marilyn. We have about 5 minutes if anyone has a question they'd like to ask.
Oh, sorry. I thought we only had 50. Okay.
You do, but it goes to 55 because we started it that fast.
Oh my gosh. Gotta tell me these things, Chris.
Gail.
Anyway.
I think I okay, I think I kept muting myself. Thank you. My computer overheated and died, so I was gone, and I heard you discussing the six different things. I wondered, what did I miss?
Of the 6, can you think of something that was missed?
I don't know of what 6 we were talking about. I think my computer died quite a while ago. It overheated, and I put every fan in the house on it and just now got back to you. So what 6 things were we discussing?
We were discussing the 6 categories. So are you on your computer
Thank you.
now?
I see it now on my screen. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to see what I missed.
Yeah, so
Give me a moment to read those.
absolutely, please. Yeah, and I like the mirror. I thought, you know, that looking in the mirror now, you know, we look in the mirror and see ourselves as we are, but we can also look in a mirror and see ourselves as we want to be. And I think that that was one of the goals of this presentation, to really examine who we are and what we can do to become better servers as Jesus.
I think God has a question. He asked the question that, but he can ask it himself. I unmuted him.
So what has been the most difficult habit for me? All right, well, I was hoping to avoid telling you, but since you asked, I think mine is the friendly, kindly, graciously to others. I think, you know, I'm much more of an introvert, so I think it's just harder for me. I mean, I felt kind of like Christina in a way when she was speaking, that, you know, I can listen to each other. I think it's strength, but I have to do that all the time in my job, and I have to listen to teachers who don't want to cooperate with me. So I've gotten pretty good at it. But I do think the friendly, how do you kind of take that as Jesus passed by attitude, I think that's probably the hardest one for me, at least that I can think I could improve on.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilynn.
You're welcome. Well, I did have an ending slide that I thought maybe I shouldn't use, but I'll have to go there. Well, this is it. And so shaping your habits of service, because I hope you can take away from today and say, okay, there's something that I can do. Okay, so as we conclude today, please be reminded of the advice in the section as Jesus passed by. And it behooves the Master's followers in all ages to learn to minister as they pass by, to do unselfish good as they go about their daily duties. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we do have a 5-minute break.